Okay, one more question, Dr. Pan.
Thank you. I'd sort of follow up on the math science teacher issue. So I guess the question is that are we looking at, when we're trying to recruit people to teach, let's say, math and sciences, and particularly, I guess, we're probably talking middle, high school, right? Are we looking at people who are interested in teaching first and then into math and science, or people who are interested in math and science and trying to entice them to go into teaching it? And then I guess the other related question is that what's the data on, like, are the top students in colleges going into teaching, or is it people, where in terms of it goes back to sort of the question about how we respect teachers and how attractive a field it is. I mean, we may be getting people in, but are we the best students are trying to get in, or is it people who are sort of?
There's an interesting thing. There's often a statistic quoted that, in Singapore, the top third of individuals in the cohort go into teaching, which is the top third of high school graduates. The CSU system accepts the top third of high school graduates in California, so that's exactly analogous. And most studies have found that secondary teachers fall in the top half of the college population. Elementary teachers right near the middle, and then physical education teachers on their test scores were a little lower, but in general, we are getting highly able people. We also have a whole battery of tests that people have to take before they can become teachers, beyond basic skills tests, subject matter knowledge tests, which are very challenging, and then a performance assessment of teaching. So we're getting people into the profession who, for the most part, are pretty well placed in the top end of the high school distribution, or that cohort, yeah.
Or the question about, are we trying to get?
Well, I think that high school teachers generally, if you ask them, and I teach high school teachers, and I ask them this question all the time, and they'll say, I love my subject. I mean, that's always, a motivator, but they will typically say, and I love adolescents, I love the students. And when you get kids coming through college, you can get them coming in either door, like I love the kids, and or I love the subject and I want to teach it. And as long as they put those two pieces together, you're going to end up with a thoughtful teacher. A lot of young people in college will also have done outreach, mentoring, tutoring kids in, various schools, after-school programs. So if you can be attentive to recruiting them from those places where they're getting that satisfaction from working with others, I can often, that's how I got into teaching myself. It really helps them see, oh, wow, I can make a real difference in people's lives.
Senator Allen.
Just a quick follow-up. So this quote that you keep hearing that bandied around about, the majority of American teachers coming from the bottom third of their graduating college class, you're basically flatly.
Yeah, I mean, that hasn't been true since the 1980s. But, conventional wisdom dies hard. Right. And the best study about this was done by ETS, and they used the test scores that they collect about, who actually got into college, got through a teacher ed program. One of the other things that reinforces it is that SAT test takers and ACT test takers are often asked when they're in high school what profession they think they'd like to go into. But many of those people never go into those professions. So there may be a lower part of the cohort that is, responding, but the qualifications to get into teaching have been increasing dramatically since the 1980s. So some of those young people who might think they want to go into teaching will not make it through the basic skills tests and the subject matter tests and so on. And others will decide they're not, if this is not for them, and others will be attracted in. So it is not the same population who goes into teaching and makes it through a teacher ed program as those who might say in 11th grade, gee, I think I might want to be a teacher.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your comments, and
good luck.
We'll be back. We'll continue this conversation. Our first panel today is recruitment and retention, and we would invite Judy Johnson, the former executive director of the Kotzen Foundation for the Art of Teaching, Ryan Smith, executive director of Ed Trust West, and Patricia Rucker, our legislative advocate for the California Teachers Association. So, what do teachers need to be successful in the classroom and enhance their skills over time? And what is the role of induction, collaborations, mentoring, career ladders, and master teachers? Thank you for joining us today. Judy, why don't we start with you?
Thank you. Well, I think this is the most appropriate question you could have asked about how do we get to quality teaching? By asking what it is that teachers need in order to be successful and to continuously enhance their practice over time. And the reason I think this is such an important question is because it acknowledges that teachers need to be the focus of our attention. If we want to get to excellence in teaching, we want to get to great competence in teaching in our schools, because they are the people who do the work every day, who are closest to the students, and who will make the difference. In addition, the question acknowledges that we know it'll take time to get to high-quality education, that it's not something you can do with a quick fix or in an instant. And we can respect the importance of taking time to get better at one's profession. Answers to this essential question, I think, are found in what is working now. And if you don't mind, I'll share what I know partly from my experience of working with the Coatson Foundation for the Art of Teaching. And I think that's a valuable resource for this conversation, because it's a California organization working with over 1,000 teachers for 15 years in 23 school districts and 125 elementary schools in the state of California, both Northern California and Southern California. So the results and the experience is pertinent to your concerns for the state. What has worked in that foundation, working directly with teachers throughout California, is a multi-pronged strategy. It's a strategy of professional development that is unique in some ways, but also has the special ingredients that effective programs do across the country. In the schools that are working in terms of improving the quality of instruction, they're first of all raising the bar on expectations of what quality instruction looks like. They're asking for excellence, not just competence. And they're showing people what excellence can look like. Secondly, in the Coatson Art of Teaching schools, teachers are recruited who are the very best teachers within a school, and they're recruited in teams. And it's paying attention to raising the bar on expectations by starting with good teachers and making them great, and allowing them to do that in cohorts within schools, in teams, so that they can communally learn from each other and to raise the general performance at a school. And third, they're doing a very intensive long-term professional development over a 2-year period by being engaged in a fellowship with weekly mentoring and coaching, going to observe excellent teachers in other school districts throughout the state so they can get new ideas on what's possible, getting regular professional development by going to conferences and workshops so they can study in depth the content they need to know and the pedagogy associated with it, and doing practice in their classroom and getting feedback on a regular basis. We know from research that 10 to 15 hours of professional development a year is going to have no effect on the classroom. So if you want teachers to grow and to get to excellence, they need so much more. In the Coatson Fellowship, they get about 130 hours annually each year for 2 years in weekly coaching, in these observations of teachers, in working together in study groups each month, studying practices that will work with their kids, and giving each other feedback on what is actually working as they try it out in the classroom. and attending workshops and learning new things that they were not aware of before. Teachers tell us that they learn best by learning from each other. And so help comes in the form of these collaborative conversations around inquiry, around coaching with an expert teacher, giving feedback all of the time, and from developing teacher leaders who then assist others within the school setting or in the district setting so that they can develop their expertise. What also works is when the principals and district administrators lead the effort to develop excellence in teaching. They can create the supportive environment for teachers and give them the conditions they need for learning more. They can raise the expectations on what quality looks like and ask for teachers to explore how to achieve those levels of greatness. And they can allocate the resources necessary for teachers to organize and support the type of professional learning they need to take the next steps to getting great. What may be surprising to you is that whole schools can get better as a result of taking a small cohort of the very best teachers within a school to lead the effort to improve. As they get better themselves, they interest other teachers in their school building and what they're achieving with the students. That shared knowledge, they become sort of advocates for new practices, and other teachers begin to want to learn that and pick it up. And there's an increase in motivation to try and take risks to learn new strategies because they see the effects on children as being much more rewarding. So the approach is, instead of pushing the school only up from the bottom by working with new teachers and those who are weakest in the teaching profession, instead of pulling the quality of teaching up from the top by having the very best teachers within a school setting be the advocates for raising the bar on what quality can look like and what teachers can do to achieve it. We have many examples in California of what great teaching looks like and schools that have been successful in achieving it. They all have elements in common of how they've got there. There are 8 sort of basic steps that allow schools to and whole districts to improve the quality, and one is setting the aspirations at a higher level and knowing some examples of what that looks like so that teaching can be focused on at its very best performance. Building upon teachers' strengths and picking the very best teachers to lead the effort to grow the quality of teaching within a school or a district. A third point would be providing opportunities to observe others who are already doing excellent teaching in their classrooms so that you can get new ideas. A fourth would be to engage teachers in extensive and effective professional development that includes weekly coaching and mentoring, along with intensive and deep training in both content and methodology at workshops and at conferences. The fifth point is give the teachers the resources they need to implement new strategies that they're learning and picking up so that they can try them out with their students and find out what is really working for the children. 6, faculty need to collaborate because they learn with and from each other, and they need the settings in their school to be able to work together to share knowledge. 7, teaching needs to be public, classrooms need to be open so we have the opportunity of seeing what greatness looks like from teacher to teacher and from parents walking into teachers' classrooms to see the best performance going on with their kids. And 8, that there's a demonstrated leadership on the part of the principal and district administrators by setting high goals for what quality teaching can be for children and supporting that by creating the structures and the climate and the environment that encourages teachers to keep learning throughout their careers. These are really referring these steps mostly to the kind of intrinsic motivation that teachers need throughout their career to keep going. We know that as teachers get better and better in the first few years, after a while that performance tends to level out. And part of that is they don't have the kind of knowledge they need and want to take the next step to perfect what they're doing. So they need access to more information about what's really possible with children by seeing it and by going and learning about it at conferences and workshops, and then by practicing it in the classroom on a regular basis. They need that, and then they need the environment in which they can work with colleagues in public settings to work in a common venture to raise the level of student achievement by changing their own teaching to really work with children. So I'm hoping that this history of work with the Codes and Art of Teaching and so many other successful projects across the state might give us information about what kinds of policies and practices could influence us to improve the quality of teaching with teachers throughout California.
Thank you very much. Mr. Smith? No, Ryan. Yeah.
Ryan Smith, you have it correct, yes.
Ryan. Yeah.
Good morning still. My name is Ryan Smith. I'm the Executive Director of Education Trust West. And I'm going to actually preface my remarks from an experience that we just had this past week. So I had the privilege of spending the day with the educators in the Sonoma County Office of Education, and they were doing their English language learner leadership conference. So 200 educators in the room. And they connected the work they were doing in that meeting with Martin Luther King's legacy. And they looked and poured through the data. They looked at where they were closing gaps and where they were not closing gaps. They talked about how can we master our craft and how can we do better for the English learners we serve. And, you know, first of all, it was a great opportunity right before the MLK weekend to really think about the work we do. But secondly, reminds me in this conversation that, you know, as we have a conversation around quantity and supply, which is really important, we must also couple that with a conversation around quality. And that can actually be done together. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we support our teachers, both in thinking about recruiting and retention and also making sure that we're helping them to success. You know, and I'm pleased to reinforce the importance of effective teaching as a way to ensure that our students get what they need, particularly Black, brown, and poor children across the state. As California's own plan for educator equity states, clearly, students of color and low-income students are less likely than their peers to be taught, or are less likely than their peers to be taught by, I should say that these students are actually more likely than their peers to be taught by underqualified, inexperienced, and out-of-field teachers. However, the problem is more than just qualification gaps. Currently, California children do not have access to effective teachers. Poor Black, brown, and brown students are least likely to have effective teachers, and we know that there's policies in place that affect that. So any discussion of supply and demand of teachers in California needs to begin and end with the firm recognition of these equity gaps across the state. The California Equity Plan was an important step forward documenting the gaps in access to highly qualified teachers and outlining concrete strategies for reducing those gaps. We should collectively commit to ensuring that the plan is effectively implemented, especially given the requirements for reporting on data as a part of the recent reauthorization of ESEA. I'm particularly pleased to talk about this topic as well because at Education Trust West, we've been focused on what it means to serve effective teachers. In 2012, we published a report focused on building and sustaining the teacher pipeline, which we'll talk about in a minute. And we've also seen some impressive work of districts across the state, places like Lucia Mar, places like Oakland Unified, who are thinking differently about supporting and retaining teachers. I want you to consider these 6 ideas for helping teachers to improve and succeed. 1, I think it's important that we make it clear to teachers what good teaching looks like across all practices and dimensions. Educators benefit from having a shared definition of good teaching, usually in the form of detailed rubric and practice. It provides a strong basis for specific evidence-based conversations about teaching and learning with considerable emphasis on student engagement. We have to give teachers frequent substantive feedback about their practice. We also have to provide teachers with professional development tied to their own learning needs and to student learning needs with a strong focus on improvement. A hallmark of a strong professional learning community is the use of student data to drive decisions about ongoing professional learning. Such a community creates time for teachers to do the necessary analysis and the deep, meaningful collaboration needed to move and close gaps. Professional development needs to expose teachers to research-based strategies and to be connected closely to their day-to-day practice. We also want to provide teachers with opportunities for deep reflection on their practice, whether with a master teacher, a coach, or an administrator or teacher. We need to help assess their own performance, help them assess their own performance, and reflect together with experts on how they can improve practice. We also want to provide teachers with opportunities to expand their responsibilities on teaching expertise. Giving teachers a chance to become mentors and master teachers based on their demonstrated expertise and compensating them for additional responsibilities can be a first step toward a more systematic career ladder and toward greater professional opportunities. I think it's also important that we focus on school climate and school conditions. Unfortunately, there is a myth that the reason why teachers in high poverty schools leave is because of the students and the poverty they live in. But truthfully, when you actually survey those teachers, their number one issue is usually around school conditions or concerns around school leadership. Let's focus, if we want to retain our teachers, as Linda mentioned before, let's focus on how we can strengthen the conditions of our schools for those teachers who are already in the front lines in impoverished communities. I think it's also important for us to talk about what it means to diversify our pipeline. My colleagues here today have touched on many strategies for helping all teachers be successful. But here are a few thoughts around the range of teacher policy spectrums. First, teachers, like the rest of us, have implicit biases about students from different backgrounds. We need to ensure that our teacher education programs who are training teachers for high poverty, high student of color schools are developing professionals who are aware of their biases and turn their awareness into higher expectations for students. The same goes for districts as they hire and place teachers. And on balance, implicit biases happen for whether you're white, whether you're brown, whether you're African American. We all have biases for students of color and low-income students. So it's important that we think about integrating that into all teacher education preparation programs. We also believe that as we ought to recruit more top-quality candidates from diverse backgrounds into teaching, we should do this by offering incentives to people to enter the profession, especially bilingual candidates and people of color. As we know, California has the largest teacher demographic gap, where the majority of our students are students of color, and the majority of our educators are white. We can also offer teacher pathways in high school so that we're training and motivating the next generation of teachers. We also believe that teachers can be compensated for their efforts, and especially for undertaking more challenging assignments. Several districts have developed incentives for groups of highly effective educators to teach in high poverty, high minority schools. Incentive programs that encourage groups of teachers with proven track records to work in high poverty schools have enormous potential to change the culture of such schools, both for students and teachers. It can also reduce the revolving door of inexperienced teachers many low-income schools experience. Our state used to have a program in through 2002, the teaching fellowships that offered $20,000 scholarships to 1,200 prospective teachers who would commit to teach for 4 years in low-performing schools. We can replicate programs like this across the country and within our own state in order to retain those teachers. Finally, we know that teachers are more successful and they stick around when they understand the communities they serve. When they know the challenges being faced by migrant families in the Central Valley, by African-American families in Oakland, or by second-generation Latino families in Los Angeles, they can definitely understand and make a difference in the classroom. So it behooves us to engage parent and community stakeholders on a continuous basis around the quality of teaching and learning going on in their schools. To be sure, they have keen insights about why teachers stay and why they leave, as well as why they are more successful in promoting student success. Helping teachers be successful and improve their practice is a complicated endeavor. As Linda said, good luck. It involves making an impact across a long supply chain and requires fundamental shifts in how we perceive and value teachers in our culture. We have many choices of where to start or where to push next. I would simply urge that in making those choices, we remain clearly focused on remedying the equity gaps that plague our system. It's the right time to do it. We have an opportunity window as we talk about the teacher shortage and what we can do around strengthening practice. And I believe this holds the greatest potential for transforming conditions for teaching and learning in our state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Rucker, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to address this panel and to participate in this conversation today. I am Patricia Rucker, and I'm here representing the California Teachers Association. As I begin this conversation, you received a handout from the CTA. CTA has a teacher evaluation work group. A great deal of time and dialogue among the members of this work group has resulted in 2 reports. CTA has published a teacher evaluation framework. I believe almost every person on this panel has received a copy of that document in the past. And today I'm giving you a copy of CTA's report to our Board of Directors on teacher preparation and early career support. What I will share with you today is a synthesis of our internal conversations and dialogue, as well as conversations that we've had with researchers like Andy Hargreaves and with education policy leaders in Canada to talk about beginning teacher and support and what those basic principles are. This panel was in danger of becoming the bobblehead panel. Everything I've heard each of my colleagues on this panel say, I find myself agreeing with and moving my head up and down, and they were doing the same thing and listening to each other. So I appreciate that. But what's been common in the conversation, as Mr. O'Donnell has pointed out, is we put a lot of emphasis on outputs, on evaluating what has happened as a result of funding particular incentives. And so the dialogue and the megaterms that we tend to use center on the same ideas about recruitment, about bonuses, about incentives. But I think the reason why I decided to share this report with you is that we centered our conversation on a very different term of art, human capital. And so I want to begin that by asking you to accept this premise. I was a beginning teacher, and I became a very good teacher. Now, you don't know anything about me other than my promise and my integrity in sitting in front of this panel that I'm telling you I developed from being a beginning teacher to becoming a very good teacher. And it happened long before there was a teacher induction program, although I'm still only in my 30s. It happened long before class size reduction. It happened long before we started focusing on highly qualified teachers and all of those conversations where teachers are beat up, schools are beat up, and we start talking about the achievement gap. It happened because I was lucky to be hired by an administrator named Doris Woods, who told me before I was hired, she wanted me at her school. And once I was approved by the governing board, she told me it was her mission to make sure that I was a successful teacher. And so when we start talking about the ideals of human capital, it requires some systems thinking and some leadership that often is not the subject of conversation in discussions about teacher recruitment, beginning teacher support. The pressure on new teachers is enormous. Beyond the obvious pressures new teachers face when they enter the profession, they're burdened with student debt. Sometimes they relocate to a new community in order to obtain a teaching position. Sometimes they face the challenges of the complex responsibilities of their chosen field of teaching. Historically, new teachers have also faced the uncertainty of working in isolation with little guidance from mentors, from colleagues, from principals. Moreover, nearly a quarter of teachers in California really do grapple with the insecurity of full and permanent employment. The success of new teachers that new teachers can experience is really shaped during the first years of their teaching experience in a link to pre-service preparation and practice These years are targeted for intervention by the BITSA programs. But what matters most is that the support is provided to these beginning teachers at a time and in a manner that best meets their individual needs at the beginning of teaching. CTA believes that induction programs are typically 1 to 2 years in duration, and they're designed to assist and support the new teacher in those initial years. When induction ends, the problem is the need for early continued support continues. So we have had a conversation about the need for beginning teacher support. And in that conversation, there's a clear shift of responsibility for beginning teacher preparation from university programs to a role that employers play. So we put a lot of time into talking about what we should do with teachers at the beginning of their career. But then there seems to be this sudden support cliff at the end of the induction program, and there is no clear plan for what to do to continue that support. There is no definite marker between early career and mid-career, but at some moment, you stop being a new teacher. There is a general agreement in our field that in the first 5 to 7 years of teaching, those are probably the early career moments. And I can say in my early career, I made all the mistakes of a beginning teacher. But what was nice about that is I was allowed to make all the mistakes of a beginning teacher. And then I was provided support to make sure I didn't keep doing that. The anecdotal evidence indicates and research confirms that for leavers and stayers alike, those early years are critical because they define a legacy for the remainder of their service in the teaching field. In too many instances, though, the new teacher who completes an induction program is once again isolated in a career of solitary practice and in a culture where there are few structures or expectations to continue to engage in a professional community of service. CTA believes that addressing these aspects of teaching is necessary, but not sufficient. No nation has gotten better by focusing on individual teachers. Better performing countries did not set out to have a very good teacher here and another good one there and so on. Effective teaching was not treated like a commodity. These countries were successful because they developed the entire teaching profession and raised the bar for all. Systems are successful as systems because 95% or more of their teachers become good. We must move on a sole focus on improving the individual teacher and expand our vision to raising the expectations for the profession as a whole, to investing in professional capital. It's time we recognize and utilize the collective wisdom, creativity, and passion of teachers and other educators, and fully exploit the innovative solutions they can generate together for the benefit of our students, our school, and our communities. To prepare a teaching workforce, and to address the challenges before us, especially in the reauthorization that comes with the Every Student Succeeds Act. Many of the policy and programmatic responses to date have focused primarily on the technical core of teacher preparation. In successful countries, though, it's clear that there's an absolute belief that quality education for all is crucial. These countries approach the task with the knowledge that everyone must be a part of the solution. They make major coordinated efforts to improve the quality of teachers through various forms of support, from professional recruitment to the profession, as well as initial teacher education through the early years of teaching, continuous learning on the job, good working conditions, and including team development and differentiated roles of leadership as their career evolves. As a beginning teacher, I completed a blended program at the University of California. I did student teaching in my senior year. But it became incumbent on my employer to make sure that the good constructs of teaching in the community where I was hired was their responsibility. In fact, I had to write an essay in submitting to with the employment application to explain what it is I believe I could contribute to that school community and to the professional learning community at that school. The present context in California provides an ideal opportunity and a pressing need to examine the role teachers can take in transforming teaching and learning and how we can best prepare them for that challenge. The implementation of the Common Core state standards, The effective use of California's local control funding formula and plan to determine education priorities and promote a quality learning environment, and the increasing responsibility assigned to teachers for student success all require the voices of teachers are heard and valued. This work is driven by 4 needs: to foster the intrinsic motivation of teachers and students. It's important to understand when we talk about the teacher pipeline, it doesn't begin as a career choice on the SAT. It doesn't even end as a career choice when we exit college. It begins with the quality of the educational experience that students receive in their classrooms, beginning in elementary school through middle school and high school. At some moment, some student looks at the person in the front of their room and decides they are doing something wonderful that they want to be a part of. So the teacher pipeline is directly impacted by the quality of the educational experience that teachers are allowed to offer to their students. The second need is to engage educators and students in continuous improvement of instruction and learning. This test and punish mentality that has labeled schools as winners and losers creates an environment not only where people don't want to enter the profession, but people don't take pride in their school or in the communities where they live. So the transformational aspects of the ESSA means we have an opportunity to focus not only on continuous learning, but continuous improvement as engendered by the principles of our local control accountability plan. To inspire collective work and responsibility. This is something I have to tell you frankly, we only give lip service to, because when we still focus on professional learning that happens outside the school day or on the weekend, or that does not provide a culture or a norm for how teachers collaborate, as they do in all those countries we want to compare ourselves to, if we don't do as they do, we cannot succeed as they do. But most importantly, the fourth need is to affect all teachers and students 100%. Teaching is a demanding endeavor. It's practiced in a complex environment. Let me restate that. Teaching is freaking hard. Pre-service teacher preparation, induction, ongoing early career support, and the credentialing policies in the state are all critical components of a system that can develop a teaching workforce prepared to support student learning. Ensuring that teachers are well prepared prior to assuming the full responsibility of a classroom and subsequently supported as they begin their careers is a task that requires high-functioning local practices for development and support. Teacher quality, then, is only a proxy for effective instruction. CTA believes these principles are the foundation for effective systems to prepare teachers and support them through the early years of their professional careers. So many of the proposals and the recommendations you've already heard, we absolutely agree with. But I want you to again think about what it means to develop the human capital of the education workforce. It's a compliment to any educator to hear that they are natural-born teachers. But the fact is, good teaching is nurtured, not natured. I'm a high school English teacher, and I said that, but we'll just pretend that's standard English anyway. So I want you to think about your own educational experience. And as I look at this panel, and as I always do, I scan the room, I know that the people I'm looking at, the people whose hands I've shaken, they are the composite of an educational experience and of a collection of teachers, some that they liked, some that they didn't like, particularly because they didn't like the subject or for other reasons. But our attitudes and values about education are also a composite of those experiences. If we want to shape the teaching profession, we must understand the decisions that we make to support beginning teachers is not just about what to do when they leave college, but what we expect their employers to do when they write those teacher improvement plans and when they write these new school plans that will be implemented in the 2017-18 school year. How do we hold them accountable for the human capital principles that they choose to develop in those plans so that we create a holistic system aimed at not only the improvement of students or the performance of students, but the improvement of a culture of teaching and learning that sustains our professional practice and eliminates the isolation that teachers and students often feel in the schools that we place them in. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you this morning.
Thank you very much.